This is where some good stuff. Okay, so we're talking Lieutenant Wilson married life. So he had married young. He married Natalie, and they had a young son. So 2 years old. That was Terry.
Oh yeah.
And Terry was just a pup. They started to, and the reason why I know a lot about this is he would write his mom, and I have all those letters. He'd write his mom, and Natalie just didn't have enough. She had not had enough a single life like the party life, and so it wasn't too long after George had signed up, and when he was away at training, Natalie would go to these parties.
Oh, she would?
She would. And she ended up just telling George that she had not played enough in her younger years, and that she actually admitted that she was going out and seeing officers.
A lot of things happen like that.
Mm-hmm. So they ended up getting a divorce. And but she held on to that for quite a while because George was providing income, and he was happy to give that income. But it got to the point where there were some decisions that needed to be made, and so Natalie, the decision was who gets to keep the child and who gets to keep the car, because George had a really nice coupe. He gave that decision to Natalie, and Natalie says, I'll take the car. So she gave Terry to George. And right before he left, he gave Terry to his mom and told, he just said, hold on to Terry until I get back.
No kidding.
Yeah. And so Natalie was not a good wife. She was actually quite a horrible person. I mean, I'm sure she had her good qualities. And I'm speaking from 5,000 feet in the air, and I was not there. But from what I read from George still was very respectful of her, and he loved her, but she didn't love him back, and she had just unplugged from him. So he got the better end of that, and he got Terry. And so,
where was he left? that kid was with his mother.
Was his mother? Yep. Now, a cool thing that I found out is that Terry. So George had a sister named Virginia, and Virginia had gotten married to Finley, who is my wife's grandfather. Finley went to war in the Pacific. He was a photographer, so a war photographer, and then George went to Europe, a B-17 pilot. But both, when they were together, both had young 2-year-olds, and they made a pact, and they said, if something happens to me, will you take care of my child? And so George had died in war, and so Finley came back and owned a car dealership, and he actually was involved in politics, and he made a good living, and he took care of Terry. So he raised Terry. He helped Retta out, but he actually put Terry with his kids. And
she didn't realize that was his real parents.
Well, he knew about his dad.
Yeah.
But all of those siblings, they brought Terry on, and so he was included in that little pack of children. And so he was raised up, and then when he turned 19, he was ready to go, and he left and moved to California and became an engineer. The bummer thing is that he died a year before I found the plane. So a year before I found his dad's plane.
Is that right?
But his wife lives in Georgia, and actually she mailed George's uniform out to me 2 months ago. So I've got George's uniform. No, and so she's been watching. So George's daughter-in-law's been watching the progress on this. His grandson lives near me in lives in Park City, and so Brian Wilson is his name. And so it's what this is doing is bringing the family together. So a family that normally doesn't communicate much, it's given us a reason to communicate. So the family's coming back together, which is kind of fun to see. Let's see.
I often wondered, nobody ever wondered why we had to go, we went back over to Santa Ana that time for a whole week.
So here's that.
No, everyone was guessing this and guessing that, but no one ever, some of them made a remark or something, but the plane was having the trouble and it was inspecting the plane, but.
Which is, I can only assume that it could have been that, but I do know. So Natalie had a cousin named Jean, and Jean was in military intelligence, so she did a lot with military intel. She was a wonderful lady, and what had happened is that George and Jean, in the communications, I'm assuming between talking about Natalie and things going on, Natalie ended up just completely leaving, and she went on her own and left. And in the last couple months of the war, I don't know the timelines, but I know George and Jean had gotten close, and she ended up actually writing and giving a lot of information to Retta, George's mom, about what had happened.
Oh yeah.
Because after you got captured, there was a period of time before the family was notified. Everybody knew that you had gone down, but they didn't know the status.
Yeah, that's right. That's what it was.
And then people knew you were a prisoner of war, and so things they were tracking you there, but because the Germans notified, yep, we've got this crew. And so, but they didn't have record of Ferguson. The Germans didn't know where Ferguson was, and they didn't know where Wilson was. I later got a report that showed the disposition of Lieutenant Wilson by the Germans. They didn't know, they just knew they captured 7 out of this crew. And it wasn't not normal. That was very normal to have a couple, because they knew some people were being rescued by the French underground, and there were some that were just weren't all there. They just.
Well, that's strange because Ferguson he had to be right behind me. He just had to.
He was in the plane when you left.
Either him or Jack. I mean, not Jack, but him and Hanson was standing there. Not standing, they was laying there, and they had to come out of there right after I did.
Okay.
So I can't figure why the French didn't find me and the other guy.
Yeah, and it's weird how things kind of played out.
Of course, I'd make a lot. I'll tell you, there's probably a lot of space there because the way that plane was going, it almost threw you out. Well, it almost did. I felt like I was being shot out of a cannon or something.
Wow.
And I'm sure their guys felt the same way when they got up there.
Well, they were probably grateful for you to open up the hatch.
Well, I'm grateful too.
And it's weird how you said you're like, I made sure that I was strong, and then you were working on your strength, and that strength, that preparation had its purpose.
Boy, you said that right. And I've thought about that many times, and boy, I'm telling you, I lived on a hill over here when I was born, and I had to go out in the winter time and sled ride, walk up and down that hill, and it went on and on and on. I kept myself up like I weighed about 160 pounds when I went there, and I was strong.
And you saved more than one life, is like you saved your life, and then you saved the life of your teammates.
Well, that's good. I hope so.
By opening up that hatch.
I hope so. I'm glad if that's the way it was. I'm glad.
That it's just when I see these little connections, these things put together, it's just that's the like this whole story is filled with little kind of gems like that. It's just amazing.
Why did I can't figure yet. Why I stopped. There's one point I couldn't move in that place, in that plane, and like I told you before, I asked myself, am I going to burn up? Am I going to feel this? Or I'm going to burn up? I actually, truthfully, thought that's what I was going to do.
But at the time, you were thinking about your mom more than yourself.
And I thought, what about Mom wouldn't like it or something if I do that, so I'm going to get out of here, try to get out. So then I took a burst of something, turned myself over, I guess.
You flipped around?
Twist. Something I twist and turned around. That's all I needed to get my foot out there, though, and that started it all. When that boot went off of there, but I mean, it come out in a hurry. That plane was gone down there, circling around, and four engines seemed to me like they was running full force. I don't know.
They were just going.
Seemed to me like it was really moving.
Well, I found the plane. I'm finding the crew. I'm working multiple angles. So the tasks I've got right now is I know where you're at. I know where Sandy's at. I've got a pretty good idea. I know where George is at. So the next thing I'm doing in France is I've got to dig up. We have to excavate, and so I'm putting together a team to excavate. I've got an archaeologist out of the University of Wyoming who's done 6 other sites like this, and it's amazing what they do. They just go one layer at a time, and it's interesting that the Earth tells the story, and they just sift through it. In fact, that last mission, he says they had a gauge, and all they brought back was a tooth that was embedded in the gauge.
Okay.
Yep. And so that family buried a tooth, but it was just enough to know that their loved one was right there.
That's and I hope you find them.
And I told the French, I said, even if we don't find George, we know that he landed probably one of the prettiest places on Earth with the nicest people on Earth. So he is in a good place right now. In fact, I sometimes think maybe I should just leave him there, because it's just such a beautiful location. It's incredible. There's reasons why the Germans wanted France, but the people are incredible. The last time I went over, instead of knocking doors, I just put myself in one location and I said, "Hey, I'm going to be here. If you'd like to know about it, would love to have you over." So I actually had like a town hall. I was expecting like 12 people show up. I had like close to 50 people there.
Okay.
And I had people handing over, they gave me a big flat gun shell from the same battery that took down your plane. They gave me a brand new, it looked like a shiny, a guy handed me a 50 caliber bullet. He says, he's like, I pulled this off of the crash site, and I've had it with me ever since.
Yeah.
I mean, it is shiny.
Yeah, that's probably one of the live round, probably, wasn't it?
It's a live round. It is. I could throw it into a.
Have you got it today?
It's in France, because I didn't want to be the guy that grabbed a live
I don't
round
think so.
and went off on a Delta flight.
No,
I wanted to come home.
So, yeah.
And what had happened, I've got a funny story, is the first time I went over, I was coming back through Minneapolis, and I was so terrified that somebody would lose my luggage, I kept everything with me. So I had this, but I had 50 cal in it. That still has grains of powder in it, by the way. But I had the bullet and then some of these casings, and I went through customs, and they put me in the box. And I got to meet the guy that was in charge of all of the things, and wanted to know why I was carrying ammunition with me. And But he could see all the parts and pieces, and I told him the story, and he just said, you know what? You need to maneuver back home, but don't do that again. So he knew everything I had was inert, that I would not be able to put a slug into a casing that looked like that and make a bit of difference. He was real. He wasn't like, he knew I wasn't a terrorist. I had a story that was pretty realistic. And quite frankly, it's a cool story. So I get to share that story with Customs.
You wouldn't want a 50 caliber, would you?
Oh, I would not turn down a 50 caliber.
You would.
I would not.
T, you know where I got them at?
I think well,
They're not live, but they're dead, but
The real.
it's a real thing.
I would love it.
Thing.
I'm actually also a shooter, so I tell all my daughter's boyfriends, I said, you know, like, there's the Eric that saves lives and the Eric that takes lives. Which one do you want to meet? They always want to meet the guy that saves lives. I don't know why.
Yeah, well, you're doing a good thing, I'll tell you that. Trying to going through all that